The hot poker seared into Sarah Navarro's shoulder blade with a hissing sound that would haunt her nightmares for years to come. But in that moment, all she could do was bite down on her own fist to keep from screaming and giving him the satisfaction. Her stepfather, Gerald, stood over her in the cramped kitchen of their homestead just outside Lusk, Wyoming, his breath reeking of whiskey and rage, the metal rod still glowing faintly orange in the dim lamplight of that November evening in 1883. Sarah's mother had been dead for 3 months, and Gerald had shown his true colors the moment the last shovelful of dirt hit her coffin. Sarah was 19 years old, and she had nowhere to go in this unforgiving territory where winter was already creeping across the plains like a predator stalking its prey. "That will teach you to talk back to me," Gerald slurred, his words thick and mean. "You are nothing but a burden, girl. Your mama should have left you in the dirt where she found you." Sarah's vision blurred with tears and pain, but she refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break completely. Her mother had always told her she was strong, that she had fire in her blood, and even now, with her flesh burning and her world crumbling, Sarah clung to those words like a lifeline. When Gerald finally stumbled off to his bedroom to pass out, Sarah grabbed her mother's old shawl and fled into the cold November night, not knowing where she was going, only knowing she could not stay in that house another moment. The temperature had dropped below freezing, and her thin cotton dress offered little protection against the biting wind that swept across the Wyoming plains. Blood and fluid from the burn soaked through her dress, sticking the fabric to her ruined skin. Every step sent fresh waves of agony through her body, but she kept moving, one foot in front of the other, driven by pure survival instinct. The lights of Lusk were too far, and she knew she would not make it to town before collapsing. Instead, she aimed for the small line of cottonwoods that marked the creek bed, thinking perhaps she could find shelter there until morning. She made it perhaps half a mile before her legs gave out. Sarah crumpled into the brittle grass, her body shaking uncontrollably from cold and shock. The stars wheeled overhead, cold and distant, and she thought perhaps this was how her story would end, frozen on the prairie like so many others who had underestimated this harsh land. Her consciousness began to slip away, and she almost welcomed the darkness. The sound of hoofbeats penetrated her fading awareness. Strong hands lifted her, and she heard a deep voice, concerned and gentle, though the words themselves seemed to come from very far away. "Easy now, I have got you. Stay with me." Then there was warmth, the smell of leather and horse and wood smoke, and Sarah surrendered to the darkness that had been pulling at her. She woke to firelight and pain. The pain was immediate and all-consuming, radiating from her shoulder in waves that made her gasp and whimper. A cool cloth touched her forehead, and that same deep voice spoke again, closer now and clearer. "You are awake. Good. I need you to stay as still as possible. This is going to hurt, but I have to clean the wound." Sarah forced her eyes open and found herself looking up at a man she had never seen before. He was perhaps 25, with dark hair that fell past his collar and eyes the color of creek water in summer, green with flecks of brown. His face was weathered but kind, and his hands, though calloused and rough, were gentle as they supported her head. "Who are you?" she managed to whisper. "Name is Benjamin Anders," he said. "I am a horse breeder, got a ranch about 10 miles northwest of here. I was riding back from town when I spotted you in the grass. What happened to you?" The memory of Gerald and the poker flooded back, and Sarah's throat tightened. "My stepfather," she said, and could not bring herself to say more. Something dark and angry flickered across Benjamin's face, but his voice remained steady. "You are safe now. I brought you to my cabin. It is not much, but it is warm and dry, and no one is going to hurt you here." He paused, his jaw tightening. I am not going to lie to you, that burn is bad. Real bad. You need proper doctoring, but the nearest doctor is in Cheyenne, and that is 3 days' ride in good weather. A storm is rolling in, should hit by morning. We would never make it. Sarah tried to sit up, but the movement sent such a sharp spike of pain through her that she cried out. Benjamin's hand steadied her, easing her back down onto what she now realized was a bed covered in thick quilts. Do not try to move, he said firmly. The burn goes deep. I have treated wounds on horses and cattle, and I have got some experience with people too. I can help you, but it is going to take time and it is going to hurt. Do you trust me? She looked into his eyes and saw nothing but honest concern. She had no choice, really, but somehow she knew she would have trusted him anyway. There was something solid about him, something decent that Gerald had never possessed. Yes, she whispered. Good, Benjamin said. He moved away briefly and returned with a bottle and a clean cloth. This is carbolic acid. It is going to burn like hellfire when I pour it on, but it will keep infection out. After that, I will dress it with honey and bandages. I have seen honey work wonders on burns. He met her eyes again. You can scream if you need to. There is nobody around for miles to hear. Sarah nodded, gripping the edge of the quilt with her good hand. When the carbolic acid hit the wound, she did scream, a raw sound torn from her throat that seemed to go on forever. Benjamin worked quickly, his face set in lines of concentration, and when the worst was over, he carefully applied honey to the burn and wrapped it in clean linen strips. By the time he finished, Sarah was shaking again, tears streaming down her face, but the immediate agony had faded to a throbbing ache. You did well, Benjamin said softly. He brought her a tin cup filled with water, holding it to her lips so she could drink. You need to rest now. I will keep the fire going and I will check on you through the night. If you need anything, just call out. I will be right here. Where will you sleep? Sarah asked, her voice barely audible. I will make a bedroll by the fire, Benjamin said. You need the bed more than I do. As exhaustion pulled her under again, Sarah's last conscious thought was that she had been saved by a stranger who showed her more kindness in 1 hour than Gerald had shown her in 2 years. The storm hit before dawn, just as Benjamin had predicted. Sarah woke to the howling of wind and the sound of snow driving against the cabin walls. Pain still radiated from her shoulder, but it was different now, less sharp and more of a deep, burning ache. She turned her head carefully and saw Benjamin crouched by the fireplace, feeding logs into the flames. He must have sensed her movement because he looked over immediately. Storm is a bad one, he said, coming to her side. How are you feeling? Like I was branded, Sarah said, and was surprised to hear a trace of humor in her own voice. Benjamin's expression softened. I need to check the wound and change the dressing. It has been about 6 hours. The process was agonizing, but Sarah gritted her teeth and endured it. The burn looked angry and red, but Benjamin seemed cautiously optimistic. No signs of infection yet, he said. That is a good thing. We need to keep it clean and dressed. I will need to change the bandages twice a day, maybe more if there is drainage. Over the next few days, a routine developed. The storm raged outside, dumping snow in drifts that reached past the cabin windows. Inside, Benjamin tended to Sarah's wound with the patience of a man who understood that healing could not be rushed. He fed her broth and bread, helped her sit up when she was strong enough, and changed her dressings with steady, gentle hands. Between the wound care, he talked to her, asking about her life, telling her about his own. Sarah learned that Benjamin had come to Wyoming 5 years earlier from Missouri, following a dream of breeding horses on the open range. He had built his ranch from nothing, working sunrise to sunset, learning the land and the animals. He had a small herd of horses, maybe 30 head, that he bred for stamina and temperament. Cowboys need reliable mounts, he explained. I do not breed for fancy looks. I breed for horses that will not quit when the work gets hard. In turn, Sarah told him about her mother, about growing up in Kansas and moving to Wyoming after her real father died of fever. She spoke haltingly about Gerald, about how he had seemed decent enough when her mother was alive, but how he had changed after the funeral. Benjamin listened without judgment, though she saw his hands clench into fists when she described the poker. "He will not touch you again," Benjamin said quietly. "I give you my word on that." As the days turned into a week, then two, Sarah grew stronger. The wound began to heal, though Benjamin warned her it would leave a significant scar. "I am sorry I could not do more," he said one evening as he applied fresh honey to the burn. "You saved my life," Sarah said, looking at him steadily. "I would have died out there in the cold. You have nothing to apologize for." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition that went beyond gratitude and kindness. Benjamin held her gaze for a long moment, and Sarah felt her heart beat faster in a way that had nothing to do with pain or fear. The storm finally broke after 18 days, leaving the world outside transformed into a landscape of white. Benjamin had been right about being snowed in. The drifts were so deep that the cabin door would not open until he climbed out a window and shoveled them clear. Sarah watched from the bed, now able to sit up on her own, as he worked to create a path to the barn where his horses sheltered. "I need to check on the animals," he said when he came back inside, his face ruddy from cold. "They have food and water, but I need to make sure they weathered the storm all right. Will you be okay for an hour or two?" "I will be fine," Sarah assured him. In truth, she felt remarkably well considering what she had been through. The wound still hurt, especially when she moved her arm, but the worst was past. She had been watching Benjamin care for her for weeks now, and she had come to understand that this was a good man, perhaps the best man she had ever known. While he was gone, Sarah managed to get out of bed on her own for the first time. She was wearing one of Benjamin's shirts, far too large on her frame, and her legs were shaky from disuse. She made her way slowly to the window and looked out at the white expanse. The ranch stretched before her, simple but well built, with a barn and several corrals visible through the snow. She could see Benjamin in the distance, a dark figure against the white, moving among the horses. Something in her chest tightened as she watched him. Over the weeks of her recovery, she had come to know him in ways that went beyond simple conversation. She had seen his patience, his kindness, his absolute reliability. When he said he would do something, he did it. When he made a promise, he kept it. After years of living with Gerald's unpredictability and cruelty, Benjamin's steadiness was like water in a desert. But more than that, she had come to care for him. She looked forward to his presence, to his voice, to the way he smiled when she made a joke despite her pain. She thought about him when he was not in the room, wondering what he was doing, wishing he would come back. These feelings frightened her because they were so intense, but they also felt right in a way nothing else in her life had felt for a long time. When Benjamin returned, he found her standing by the window and his eyes widened. "You should not be up yet," he said, hurrying to her side. "I needed to move," Sarah said. "I cannot stay in bed forever." "How does it feel?" Benjamin asked, concern evident in his voice. "It hurts," Sarah admitted, "but it is a good hurt if that makes sense, like healing hurts." Benjamin smiled and the expression transformed his face, making him look younger. "That makes perfect sense," he said. He helped her back to the bed, but this time he arranged the pillows so she could sit propped up rather than lying flat. "The horses are all fine. A few of the mares look like they will foal early this spring." That is good news, means more stock to sell. Tell me about them, Sarah said, settling back against the pillows. The horses. You talk about them like they are family. Benjamin pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, and for the next hour he told her about each horse, their personalities and quirks, which ones were clever and which ones were stubborn, which mares produced the best foals, and which stallion he was hoping would improve his bloodlines. Sarah listened, enchanted not just by the stories but by the passion in his voice. This was a man who loved what he did, who had built something real and lasting with his own hands. "Why did you help me?" Sarah asked when he paused. "You do not know me. You could have taken me to town, left me with someone else. Instead, you brought me to your home and you have been caring for me for weeks." Benjamin was quiet for a long moment, his green-brown eyes thoughtful. "I could not leave you out there," he finally said. "That is not the kind of man I am. And once I brought you here and saw how badly you were hurt, I knew you needed more than just a ride to town. You needed someone to care." He paused again, then added softly, "And if I am being honest, I have not minded the company. It gets lonely out here in winter." "I have not minded it either," Sarah said, her heart beating fast. "The company, I mean." Their eyes met and held, and the air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken words. Benjamin reached out slowly and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm around hers. "Sarah," he said, his voice low and serious, "when you are healed, when spring comes, you can go anywhere you want. I will help you get to Cheyenne or Denver or anywhere you choose. But I want you to know that you are welcome to stay here as long as you like. There is no pressure, no expectation. I just want you to know that you are safe here and wanted." Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes, but they were not tears of pain. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means more than you know." December arrived with more snow and bitter cold. Sarah continued to heal, and as her strength returned, she began to help with small tasks around the cabin. She could not do heavy work, not with her shoulders still tender, but she could cook and mend and keep the fire going while Benjamin tended the animals. They fell into an easy partnership, moving around each other in the small space with a natural rhythm that felt as old as time. Sarah found herself thinking more and more about what would happen when spring came. Benjamin had said she could go anywhere, but the truth was she did not want to go anywhere. She wanted to stay here in this cabin, with this man who had saved her life and shown her what kindness truly looked like. But she was afraid to say so, afraid that he was only being polite, that he did not feel the same pull that she felt every time their hands accidentally brushed or their eyes met across the room. One evening in mid-December, a particularly fierce wind was howling outside, making the cabin walls creak and groan. Sarah was stirring a pot of stew while Benjamin mended a broken bridle by the fire. The domesticity of the scene struck her suddenly, how right it felt to be here doing these simple tasks together. "Benjamin," she said, her voice tentative. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything," he said, looking up from his work. "You ever think about the future? About what you want your life to look like?" Benjamin set down the bridle and gave her his full attention. "I think about it sometimes," he said carefully. "I always figured I would keep building the ranch, maybe get the herd up to 50 or 60 head. I thought maybe someday I would find a good woman to share it with, have a family. But out here, opportunities to meet people are few and far between. Most of the time I figured I would just be on my own." He paused, his eyes searching her face. "Why do you ask?" Sarah took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "Because I think about the future too. Before I met you, I did not think I had one. I thought I would either freeze to death on the prairie or spend the rest of my life trapped with Gerald, wishing I was dead. But now I think about spring, about summer, about years from now. And when I think about those things, I always think about being here." Benjamin stood slowly, crossing the small distance between them. He took the spoon from her hand and set it aside, then gently cupped her face with both hands. "Sarah Navarro," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I have been half in love with you since the moment I found you in that grass, so fierce and determined to survive. These weeks with you have been the best of my life, even with all the worry and the work. I did not say anything because I did not want to take advantage, did not want you to feel obligated because I helped you. But if you are saying what I think you are saying, then I need you to know that I want you to stay. Not as a guest, not as someone I am helping. I want you to stay because this is your home, because you want to be here with me." "I do want that," Sarah whispered. "I want all of that." Benjamin kissed her then, soft and careful, mindful of her healing shoulder. Sarah kissed him back, pouring into it all the feelings she had been holding inside for weeks. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless and smiling. "I love you," Benjamin said simply. "I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a short time, but I have never been more certain of anything." "I love you too," Sarah said, and felt the truth of it resonate in her bones. "You saved me in every way a person can be saved." That night, Benjamin held her carefully as they lay in the bed together for the first time, her back against his chest, his arm draped protectively over her waist. Outside the wind howled and the snow fell, but inside the cabin, Sarah felt warm and safe and cherished in a way she had never experienced before. Christmas came and went quietly. Benjamin surprised Sarah with a gift he had been secretly working on, a carved wooden box with her initials on the lid. "For keeping things safe," he explained. "Things that matter to you." Sarah gave him a new shirt she had sewn from fabric she found in a trunk, working on it in stolen moments when he was outside. The fit was not perfect, but Benjamin wore it with pride, saying it was the finest shirt he had ever owned. As January arrived and the worst of winter settled in with brutal cold and more snow, Benjamin continued to tend Sarah's wound with devoted care. The burn was healing well, forming a thick scar that would mark her forever. "Does it bother you?" Sarah asked one day as he was changing the dressing. "The scar, I mean. It is ugly." Benjamin's hand stilled, and he looked at her with such intensity that her breath caught. "That scar is proof that you survived," he said firmly. "It is proof that you are strong enough to endure things that would break most people. There is nothing ugly about that, Sarah. Nothing at all." Tears filled her eyes. "How do you always know the right thing to say?" "I just tell you the truth," Benjamin said simply. He finished securing the bandage and then pulled her close, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "You are beautiful, Sarah. That scar does not change that." As the weeks passed and winter maintained its grip on the land, Sarah and Benjamin grew closer still. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for the future. Benjamin spoke of expanding the ranch, of building a bigger house someday, of raising horses that would be sought after throughout the territory. Sarah talked about wanting to learn to ride properly, about maybe starting a garden in the spring, about simple dreams that now seemed possible. They also talked about the practical matters that lay ahead. "We should get married," Benjamin said one evening in late January. "I mean, if you want to. I know we already talked about you staying, but I want to make it proper. I want everyone to know that you are my wife, that you belong here." "I want that too," Sarah said, warmth spreading through her chest. "But how? We cannot get to town until the snow melts." "There is a circuit preacher who comes through in the spring," Benjamin explained. "Usually gets to Lusk sometime in April. We could go to town then, get properly married. Until then, we know what we are to each other, and that is enough for me if it is enough for you." "It is enough," Sarah agreed. "More than enough." By February, Sarah's shoulder had healed enough that she could use her arm more normally, though it still ached in cold weather and certain movements remained painful. Benjamin declared her recovery remarkable, attributing it to her youth and strength. "You are a fighter," he told her proudly. "You did not give up, not when Gerald hurt you, not during the healing. That kind of strength is rare." The days began to lengthen gradually, though the snow still lay thick on the ground. Benjamin started preparing for spring, mending fences and equipment, checking on the pregnant mares more frequently. Sarah helped where she could, learning the rhythms of ranch life, discovering that she loved the work despite its challenges. One cold morning in late February, Benjamin came in from the barn with his jaw set and his eyes worried. "One of the mares is having trouble," he said. "The foal is breached. I need to help her, but it is going to take both hands and all my attention. Can you hold the lantern and help me?" "Of course," Sarah said immediately. Grabbing her coat in the barn, the mare was down and in clear distress. Benjamin worked with calm efficiency, talking softly to the horse while his hands performed the delicate work of turning the foal. Sarah held the lantern steady, despite the cold and the length of time they were there. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the foal slid free, alive and moving. The mare nickered softly and began cleaning her baby. Benjamin sat back in the straw, exhausted and relieved. "Good work," he said to Sarah. "You did not flinch once." "I have seen worse," Sarah said quietly, thinking of that night with Gerald and the poker. Then she pushed the thought away, refusing to let him poison this moment. That was beautiful, actually. New life. Hope. Benjamin pulled her down beside him in the straw and kissed her, heedless of the cold and the mess and the tired mare watching them. "You are my hope," he said against her lips. "You are my new life." March arrived with the first hints of warming weather. The snow began to melt, creating rivers of mud and revealing the brown grass beneath. The horses grew restless, eager to be out of the barn and corrals and into open pasture. Benjamin started planning what crops they would plant, where they would expand the fencing, how many horses they might be able to sell in the fall. "I want to go see your land," Sarah said one afternoon when the sun was shining, and the temperature had climbed above freezing for the first time in months. "I want to ride out and see all of it." Benjamin saddled 2 horses, choosing the gentlest mare for Sarah. She had been practicing riding in the corral, but this was her first real ride across open range. They rode for hours, Benjamin pointing out property markers and favorite spots, places where the grass grew thick in summer and where the creek ran deep enough to water the herd. Standing on a rise overlooking the ranch buildings, small in the distance, Sarah felt a sense of belonging so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. "This is home," she said softly. "Yes," Benjamin agreed, his arm around her waist. "This is home." April brought warmer weather and new growth. The grass greened up, the horses shed their winter coats, and the foals frolicked in the pastures. True to Benjamin's prediction, the circuit preacher arrived in Lusk in mid-April, and they rode to town together on a bright spring morning. Sarah had been nervous about returning to town, worried that she might see Gerald or that people would ask questions. But Benjamin stayed close to her side, his presence solid and reassuring. They went directly to the church where the preacher was holding services and waited until the end to approach him about a wedding. The preacher, a kindly older man named Reverend Morrison, asked few questions. "I can see you two are meant for each other," he said with a smile. "Shall we do this now, or would you like to wait and have a proper ceremony with guests?" "Now," Sarah and Benjamin said in unison, then laughed. So they were married right there in the simple wooden church with only Reverend Morrison and his wife as witnesses. Sarah wore the best dress she had, one that had belonged to Benjamin's mother, and that he had given her from a trunk in the cabin. Benjamin wore his new shirt and his cleanest pants, his hair freshly trimmed. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and Benjamin kissed her, Sarah felt like her heart might burst from happiness. After the ceremony, they stopped at the general store for supplies. The storekeeper, a gregarious man named Mr. Patterson, congratulated them warmly. "Always good to see young folks settling down," he said. "This territory needs more solid families like you will be." As they were leaving the store, Sarah caught sight of Gerald across the street. He was stumbling out of a saloon, looking even more dissipated than she remembered. For a moment, their eyes met, and Sarah saw recognition and rage flash across his face. He started toward them, and Sarah felt her body go rigid with fear. But Benjamin stepped forward, placing himself between Sarah and Gerald. "You have no business with us," he said, his voice calm but hard as iron. "Move along." "That is my daughter," Gerald slurred, pointing at Sarah. "She ran off, left me high and dry. She belongs to me." "She is my wife," Benjamin said, each word precise and final. "She belongs to herself, and she has chosen to be with me. You hurt her, and you will never have the chance to do it again. Now walk away while you still can." Something in Benjamin's stance and his voice must have penetrated even Gerald's drunken haze. He hesitated, then spat in the dirt and turned away, muttering curses under his breath. Sarah watched him go and felt a chapter of her life close forever. "You are shaking," Benjamin said softly, turning to her with concern. "I am all right," Sarah said, and realized it was true. "I was afraid for a moment, but then I realized he has no power over me anymore. He is just a sad, angry man, and I am free of him." Benjamin pulled her close, heedless of the people passing by on the street. "You are free," he agreed. "And you are mine, and I am yours, and nothing will ever change that." They rode back to the ranch as husband and wife, and that night they consummated their marriage in the bed where Benjamin had nursed Sarah back to health all those months ago. Despite the pain she had endured, despite the scar that would mark her forever, Sarah gave herself to Benjamin completely, and he was gentle and passionate in turn. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the moonlight streaming through the window, and Sarah thought she had never been happier. The summer of 1884 was one of hard work and deep contentment. Sarah learned to manage the household and the ranch with growing confidence. She started her garden, planting vegetables and herbs, and was thrilled when things actually grew. She improved her riding skills until she could help Benjamin move the horses between pastures and check fence lines. She learned to assist with foaling and basic veterinary care, and discovered she had a good touch with the animals. Benjamin was patient and encouraging, always ready to teach her new skills but never making her feel inadequate when she struggled. Their love deepened as they worked side by side, facing challenges together and celebrating victories together. They argued sometimes, as any couple does, but they always talked through their disagreements and never went to bed angry. In August, Sarah realized she had missed her monthly courses twice in a row. She waited another week to be sure, then told Benjamin one evening after supper. His face lit up with joy so pure and bright that Sarah laughed and cried at the same time. "A baby," he said, wonder in his voice. He placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" Sarah asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Benjamin said. He kissed her tenderly, then pulled back with sudden concern. "Should you be doing all the work you have been doing? Should you rest more? What do you need?" Sarah laughed. "I am pregnant, not made of glass. Women have been having babies and working ranches for as long as there have been ranches. I will be fine." But Benjamin fussed over her anyway, insisting she take breaks, lifting anything heavy himself, constantly checking that she was not overdoing it. Sarah found his concern endearing even when it was excessive, and she let him take care of her because she knew it made him feel better. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the fall. Sarah continued her work, though she did adjust her activities as her belly grew. Benjamin hired a young cowboy named Tom to help with some of the heavier ranch work, and Tom proved to be a good worker and a friendly presence. He bunked in the barn and took his meals with them, becoming something like a younger brother to both of them. Winter came again, Sarah's second winter on the ranch, but this time it held no terror. The cabin was warm and well stocked with food, the animals were healthy and secure, and Sarah was surrounded by love. She spent the long winter evenings knitting baby clothes and sewing blankets while Benjamin worked on building a cradle, the wood smooth and beautiful under his skilled hands. "You hope for a boy or a girl?" Sarah asked him one evening in January of 1885, watching him work on the cradle. Benjamin looked up, considering. "I do not care either way," he said honestly. "As long as the baby is healthy and you are healthy, that is all that matters to me." "I think I hope for a boy," Sarah said. "A boy like you, strong and kind and good." "If we have a daughter, she will be like you," Benjamin countered. "Fierce and brave and beautiful." Their son was born on a cold March morning, arriving a few weeks earlier than expected but healthy and strong. The birth was long and difficult, attended by a midwife from town who had come to stay at the ranch for the last month of Sarah's pregnancy. Benjamin paced outside for hours, and when the midwife finally emerged to tell him he had a son and that Sarah was fine, he nearly collapsed with relief. Sarah lay exhausted in the bed, the baby nestled in her arms when Benjamin came in. Tears streamed down his face as he looked at them. "He is perfect," Benjamin whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. "You are perfect. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for giving me this." "We made him together," Sarah said softly. "He is ours, Benjamin, our family." They named him William Benjamin Anders, after Benjamin's father who had died years before. Little William had his mother's dark hair and his father's green-brown eyes, and he quickly proved to have a healthy appetite and strong lungs. Benjamin was a devoted father from the first moment, helping with nighttime feedings, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with William when he was fussy. As spring arrived and the ranch work intensified, Sarah and Benjamin juggled childcare and chores with practiced teamwork. Tom proved invaluable, taking on more responsibility so that Benjamin could spend time with his family. The ranch prospered, the horse herd growing and gaining a reputation for quality throughout the territory. One evening in May, when William was 2 months old and sleeping peacefully in his cradle, Sarah and Benjamin sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Benjamin had his arm around Sarah, and she leaned into his warmth, feeling completely content. "Do you ever think about that night?" Benjamin asked quietly. "The night I found you." "Sometimes," Sarah admitted. "But when I do not think about the pain or the fear anymore. I think about how it led me to you, to this life. I would not change anything, Benjamin, because it brought me here." "I think about it too," Benjamin said. "I think about how close I came to not finding you, to riding past that spot 5 minutes earlier or later. The thought terrifies me." He pulled her closer. "But you are right. Everything that happened, good and bad, led us to this moment. And this moment is perfect." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. Inside the cabin, William made a small sound in his sleep, and both parents smiled, recognizing it as the contented noise he made when he was dreaming. "I want more of these," Sarah said suddenly. "More children, I mean, maybe 2 or 3 more if God wills it. I want this house to be full of life and laughter." "Then we will fill it," Benjamin promised. "We will build the biggest, loudest, happiest family in Wyoming." And they did. Over the next years, 3 more children arrived, 2 girls and another boy. Elizabeth Sarah Anders was born in 1887, a quiet baby who grew into a thoughtful child. James Henry Anders arrived in 1889, loud and boisterous from his first breath. And finally, Mary Catherine Anders came in 1892, the baby of the family, spoiled and loved by everyone. The ranch grew along with the family. Benjamin and Sarah built a larger house to accommodate their expanding brood, keeping the original cabin as a guest house, and sometimes as a quiet retreat when they needed time alone. The horse herd numbered nearly 80 head by 1895, and Benjamin's horses were sought after by ranchers and cavalry officers throughout Wyoming and beyond. Sarah proved to be a natural horsewoman and an astute businesswoman. She kept the ranch books, managed the household accounts, and often accompanied Benjamin to horse sales, her sharp eye for quality and her skillful negotiation earning them better prices. The scar on her shoulder remained, faded now but still visible, and she wore it without shame, a reminder of where she had come from and how far she had traveled. Gerald died in the winter of 1890, frozen in an alley behind a saloon in Cheyenne. Sarah felt nothing when she heard the news beyond a distant pity for a life so wasted. She had long since forgiven him, not because he deserved forgiveness, but because holding on to anger would have poisoned her own happiness. She chose instead to focus on the life she had built, the family she cherished, the man she loved more with each passing year. On their 10th wedding anniversary in April of 1894, Benjamin took Sarah back to that rise overlooking the ranch where they had stood so many years before. The view was different now, with the bigger house and expanded corrals and barns, with horses grazing as far as the eye could see. Their children were with Tom back at the house, giving their parents a rare afternoon alone. "You remember standing here the first spring you were here?" Benjamin asked, his arm around Sarah's waist in the same position it had been then. "I said this was home," Sarah replied, leaning into him. "And it was true then, but it is even more true now. You gave me everything, Benjamin. A home, a family, a life worth living. I was nothing when you found me, and you made me everything." "No," Benjamin said firmly, turning her to face him. "You were never nothing, Sarah. You were always strong, always brave, always worthy. I just gave you a safe place to heal and to grow into who you were meant to be." "You did the rest yourself." "We did it together," Sarah corrected gently. "That is what makes it so perfect. We built this together, and we will keep building it together for the rest of our lives." Benjamin kissed her then, long and deep and full of the love that had only grown stronger over a decade. When they finally pulled apart, Sarah rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, the same heart that had been beating for her since that cold November night in 1883. As the sun began to set, painting the Wyoming sky in brilliant colors, they walked hand in hand back to the house where their children waited. Through the windows, Sarah could see William helping Tom set the table, Elizabeth reading to her younger siblings, the whole scene warm and bright and full of life. This was her legacy, she thought. Not the pain of her past, but the love of her present and future. Not the scar on her shoulder, but the 4 children who carried her blood and Benjamin's, who would grow up knowing they were cherished and safe. Not the cruelty of Gerald, but the kindness of Benjamin, passed down through generations. They stepped through the door into warmth and noise and laughter, into the life they had built from nothing but determination and love. Sarah caught Benjamin's eye across the room as the children surrounded them, clamoring for attention, and in that look was everything they needed to say. They had survived the worst and created the best. They had healed each other, saved each other, loved each other through every trial, and they would continue to do so every day for the rest of their lives, building their legacy one moment at a time in the wild, beautiful land they called home.